Summer Bock is a trained herbalist certified in integrative nutrition through Columbia University. A raver in her early 20s, devastating allergies emerged that left her exhausted, hive-ridden, and only able to consume 30 foods without a reaction. An outlook that stumped the medical community. Leveraging her background in microbiology and fascination with gut health, Summer healed herself through research and formulation of various digestive bitters, which she now produces for her Guts and Glory Apothecary online. Summer Bock coined the phrase gut rebuilding, which is now a cornerstone terminology in the integrative health conversation. She is the founder of the Fermentationist Certification Program. So you already studied microbiology like in college, and then kind of studied more like practical aspects of that?
Well, I studied it in college, and I did a bunch of projects regarding the microbes that ferment things. So I did various controlled studies, and it was really cool. I mean, that's partially what started my fascination with it. And then I was also studying nutrition and went to IIN and had been trained as an herbalist since 2001. And when I got done with herbal medicine school, they don't really teach you how to have clients or how to work. Like, it's really confusing. You get done, you're like, I know all this stuff. And then you just end up trying to help all your roommates and your friends and people that you encounter. And you're like, let me just help everyone. But you have no idea how to make a business out of it or anything like that, So for me, it was just kind of this combination of my health concerns and what was going on. Like, I had to figure out how to deal with that stuff. And that's what led me into gut health. And I was kind of already fascinated by microbes and all of the science. And it was just a natural fit.
Just came together.
And it was, it was really helpful. And it's been a really helpful lens for me to look through as I figured out what was going on with my health. And, at first, because of my herbal training, I was taking herbs to help my liver, to help clear up my allergies. I was taking herbs to help calm down, to help sleep, to get rid of anxiety. I was taking herbs to help with allergies and histamine level, all sorts of things. I was taking herbs for digestion, for constipation. I mean, I was just like doing all these things I knew, and that was working a little bit, but I was never really resolving the issues. And
because you feel like you weren't getting to the core of like the gut health. Is that basically what you're saying?
Yeah. And this was before you could research this stuff online, like things didn't show up. We weren't where we are now, where people understand that the gut really is the root of a lot of these issues. And I encountered a naturopathic doctor who told me to take probiotics. I had never heard of probiotics at this point. And I took them and they started making a big difference. And then I asked myself, because I was trained as an herbalist, I was like, well, what's the whole food version of probiotics? Because I know my ancestors weren't taking little white pills made in a laboratory. These are essential. If these are something that I need, that my body's supposed to have, like, where does this come from? And that's when I, encountered Sally Fallon's work. Sandra Katz started to come on the scene at that time, who is really big into like fermentation revival. And I realized that's what my ancestors did. And that's what people all over the world have been doing for literally tens of thousands of years. We've been fermenting things.
To preserve food, mainly. Probably. I mean, obviously had fringe benefits, but yeah.
Yes. So there's psychoactive reasons that we ferment things. And then there's the preservation quality. That's the main reason that people would ferment stuff. And people at that point in time didn't know there were microbes. We only really discovered microbes in the late 1800s, mid 1800s. So it was really, all about just like, how do we survive? And so this symbiotic relationship between these organisms and us happened over a long, long period of time. And then we developed these foods in symbiosis with the organisms. And that's how we continue to inoculate ourselves on a regular basis. And so I think it's really interesting because we didn't do that in the United States for a long time. We started pasteurizing everything. We've been making the shelf life of everything increase. We got refrigerators, and the need for preserving things through fermentation was, no longer relevant. It became moot. So in that process, we lost a lot of our ancient traditions around this amazing process, quite honestly, that's very beneficial, very supportive of balancing the gut microbiome and keep eating it, the organisms it needs and the food that it needs, and the organic acids that help fertilize that microbiome. So
I like that you use the word organic acids, which is something I've been studying a lot lately.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is like, it's such a shame, and it's changing, but it's such a shame how all that stuff became like so weird. Like it's so weird to, make your own sauerkraut and stuff. And I'd love for people to say in the chat if you do ferment your own things. You had a food company, which I think is fascinating. Do you want to talk a little bit about how that emerged and your experience with that, educating the public there?
Yeah, I think I'm, at the core, I'm an entrepreneur. And so, when I started learning about these ferments and that this was the whole food version of probiotics, this is where they come from. I started fermenting everything, and I was fermenting gallons and gallons of vegetable, all different flavors, all different kinds, and, just experimenting, keeping it new and fresh so I wouldn't get bored. And I started putting the extra in jars and in this fridge that was in my garage. So we had a second fridge in the garage. I called it the green fridge because somebody had painted it green. And people, like my friends, my roommates, their friends, started coming to my house and buying it out of the fridge. I really don't even know how this evolved. It's so magical. And so I had this jar that would sit in the fridge, and people would, on the honor system, put money in the jar and take their little jar of sauerkraut and leave. And
Wow.
I didn't even know people that were doing it. Like, people would just show up and get it. They just
just like let themselves into the garage.
It was always open.
Okay.
The garage was always open. And so they would just walk in and do, and like people would tell each other about it.
Well, yeah, that probably built like some of the lore, right? Like,
totally.
Even if you weren't interested in your sauerkraut, you're like, I get to go in someone's garage and like just put some money in a jar.
I know. Cool. It was bizarre. And that's really how my company started. And then I met some other people, and we, worked together and created a whole brand called Oli Kraut, like Olympia, because it was in Olympia, Washington, where I went to college. And we just produced amazing high quality sauerkraut for a long time, and the company still exists. I sold my half of the company to my business partner in 2014 so that I could move back here to Chattanooga, where my family is. And so it's still going strong. And
that's awesome.
It's a really fun adventure. I enjoyed it thoroughly. Food production is it's an interesting project. There's a lot going on there, but it's really fascinating because once you dive into all of that, you start to learn that there are good ways to process fermented foods and there are not so good. And in our industrial food, construct that we have today, we have the health department, we have the Department of Agriculture, and all of these governing bodies, including the FDA, and they make a lot of rules and regulations about the way things have to be done. And then also there's expense, right? Like, it's expensive to run a food processing business. And so, people shave off the expense by using plastic. And that's really one thing that I would just say to everybody is, when you're going out and buying any kind of ferment, do the research, ask the producers, email them, call them. It doesn't matter. Like, they will respond to you, and find out how they're making their food. What are they making it in? Because these ferments are generally acidic, and they should not be being fermented in plastic, even if it's BPA free, because BPA is only one of the many chemicals found in plastic. It's one that's been studied. It's one we have, proven that it has some health impact and affects the endocrine system. But there are BPS, there's all these other chemicals that are in plastic that you don't want in your body. So make sure that people are using, food grade. There's a specific kind of stainless steel or ceramic crocks. It's just really glass. It's just really important to make sure that they're using a substance that's not going to leach.
So even if you purchase it in glass, you feel like it still could have touched, been brewed in plastic or whatever.
Definitely. I know a company that does exactly that. They make theirs and they use 55-gallon plastic jugs. I mean, not jugs, barrels to brew their sauerkraut. And they brew kombucha in the same thing. Scary.
Yeah, you and I are both friends with Laura Adler, so I'll share some of her knowledge. Like, a lot of what I've learned I forget, but plastic is going to transfer easier with heat, acidity, oil, and abrasion. So any of those factors being involved are going to help it transfer. And you do see some fermented foods in like a plastic pouch too at the store. So
not ideal.
Yeah, something to think about. So you shared a bit in your bio that you had hives and you had a lot of stuff to figure out. I wonder if you could share as we dive into histamines, like when and how, I'm assuming you had histamines if you had hives, but just like, yeah, tell us like what you learned in those early days and how you've come to develop like programs and solutions around histamines.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, so I'm fascinated by the whole process. I mean, histamines are created in your body as part of an immune response. It's your body doing what it's supposed to do as a way to protect you. And, it's very much connected to a barrier, like foreign invaders, barrier, like bringing fluid to an area. Like there's so many things involved with histamine to just let your immune system know, like, we've got to get on this right now. And you have histamine. So, histamine is released from mast cells primarily around your nose.
Is it an enzyme technically, or what is it?
A hormone.
A hormone. Oh,
Yep.
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so it's released also through your mast cells in your gut. And it's crazy because it's just the way that it works in the body is so intense because it, like we're saying, like, it causes all this fluid to go to the area, white blood cells, everything starts rushing there. And the opposite in our body, the opposite of histamine is epinephrine. So epinephrine, adrenaline, cuts everything down. So, when you're thinking about, like what's going on in a histamine individual, I mean, it really sucks because it sucks really bad because that person is dealing with all kinds of like swelling, and then counteracting that is this epinephrine response.
Which your body will put up naturally to counter the high histamine.
Your body will go, oh, look, our histamine reached this level. We need epinephrine to kick in so that the epinephrine can like shut down the blood. It makes all of the blood vessels contract, and it gets all the fluids to go away from those areas so that you don't just explode. I mean, literally, that's why it does that. So there's this counteracting effect. And I think I said histamine is a hormone. I don't think histamine is actually a hormone. I just want to correct myself. I said it's a hormone, but I don't think it is. And I feel like I know what histamine is, and I'm like sitting here drawing a blank.
Well, we can Google it real quick.
Yeah, I was just curious. I'm not giving people misinformation. Okay. So the one thing I would say for me is that I got to the point where really, I mean, I was eating food and my mouth was itchy, my throat was itchy. Within a few minutes of eating, my heart rate would go up. And so I'd end up having like tachycardia as a symptom from, my histamine levels going up.
Yeah, which I think a lot of people have and don't recognize, right?
So uncomfortable too, because combined with that comes chronic anxiety. If you're experiencing high levels of histamine and then your heart rate is going up and then your body's dumping a bunch of adrenaline in to help combat that and balance that situation out, then now you're just like constantly in the state of fight or flight. It's really a struggle. And so I was dealing with rashes all over my body, all over my neck, my face. And I was waking up in the middle of the night. It started causing, panic attacks randomly. One time I woke up in the middle of the night and my heart rate was 188 beats per minute from sleep to waking up to 188 beats. I mean, that's like you running at a sprint for like, you'd have to be running at a sprint for like a few good minutes to get to that level of a heart rate. And it's so intense to have that happen. I went to the emergency room multiple times about it. They gave me epinephrine shots because my histamine levels were so high.
You had it really bad. Yeah.
It was serious. And so I've learned over the years, many, many things. And, and I've even, I've had it come back from time to time for various reasons, depending on what was going on in my life. And I want to teach people a little bit about ferments, what this has to do with ferments. And also, what are some of the things I've learned along the way about histamine and how to deal with it.
Perfect.
It says it's chemically similar to the hormone serotonin. And so maybe, yeah.
I saw a couple definitions. One was like, it's a compound. And then another did say it was a hormone. So maybe it's in one of those debatable categories.
Okay. I thought that was right. But then I just had this little moment of doubt where I was like, wait a minute, what am I talking about? Okay. We all have our moments. That was
yeah, I know. I've had some where people later were like, where'd you come up with that number after I said it somewhere? And I'm like, oh yeah, that was not a correct number.
I just want to make sure I'm communicating accurate information to everybody. It's really important to me. So, so let's talk a little bit about some of the causes. I think that's important first. Like what causes people to have histamine reactions? So there's a term that people use called histamine intolerance to describe this whole set of symptoms. Histamine intolerance, I mean, some people get diagnosed with that. I think that it's a little bit of a misnomer because the term intolerance is saying you can't tolerate histamine. Whereas what I would actually say for most people, it's called histamine overload. And that's just my own terminology, but I think that's more descriptive of what's actually happening. Because histamine overload means that now you have more than what your body can process. You're not technically intolerant to it. You need it. It's a part, it does all kinds of things in your body. It isn't just focusing on, just like fighting pathogens. It's got numerous jobs within the body. So, it even affects the nervous system and the brain and things like that.
So you need it, and everyone can tolerate it to some extent.
Absolutely. So it's always weird, like even when people say they have like an allergy to something that's like being produced by the body, that's tricky, right? The body you're not technically allergic to your own histamine. And some people are saying things like that. It's not accurate. Other people have diagnoses of MCAS or MCAD, which is mast cell activation disorder or syndrome. And this is where their mast cells degranulate. That's the term where it means they're releasing histamine more frequently or from various environmental triggers or stress triggers. And so, it's just really interesting to think about these little histamine molecules that are hanging out in your gut lining. They're hanging out in your nose and your eyes and your mouth and all your mucous membranes, even in your gut, like throughout your gut, not just your stomach. So it's fascinating because what we notice is that people will have digestive symptoms as part of it. Diarrhea can be a big one. Hunger pains, a growling, like rumbling tummy filled with hydrochloric acid. That's like oftentimes that degranulation of the histamine. Well, guess what else is in those mast cells? HCl. That's where the hydrochloric acid lives. So some people have this like constantly rumbly, hungry tummy. And so they're overeating because they're just trying to like put something to like put out that acidic fire going on in the belly. And migraines, this is a cause of unknown migraines. People are like, I get migraines. I don't know why. It also causes your face to flush. For some people, they get flushing on their face, their chest, their neck, their whole body sometimes. It depends on, the person and what they've eaten. And speaking of that, what they've eaten, there are foods that are really high in histamine and there are foods that don't really contain much histamine. And then there are foods that contain something called histidine. And histidine is it's a component and it's a molecule that's naturally found in a lot of different foods. And once you digest it and it gets into your colon, bacteria actually take that histidine and they turn it into histamine. So there are bacteria converting the histidine into histamine. So it becomes more of an internal issue. And then there are some bacteria that make histamine. So, partially like people are worried about like the food that they're eating, but sometimes they forget that it could just be being produced within the gut from an imbalanced microbiome. And I see that a lot with people. I think an imbalanced microbiome is a very common issue for people that are struggling with histamine issues. In fact, I think it can even be related to various infections, viral infections, bacterial infections, fungal infections. All of these microbes, if they're overloading your body, they're basically telling your immune system to turn on and stay on high alert. So I think people are dealing with these, infections on various levels, and that's what's causing a lot of the histamine problems. So, you have to think about like, what's the root here? For a lot of people, you have to deal with this infection, and, taking something like antibiotics isn't just going to like handle it right away because it could be fungal, it could be viral. So how is your viral load? How is your fungal load? How's your bacterial load? Those things are hard to figure out. You can do things like an oats test. You can do a GI effects, a stool analysis. But, when it comes to histamine issues and figuring out what is the exact cause of these histamine issues, it's really challenging to find out. You can diagnose based on all the symptoms and you can kind of whittle it down and figure that out. But when I'm working with people with histamine issues, what we actually end up doing often is figuring out how to go on what I call a low microbe diet. And so they actually stop consuming meat. Even though I think that, I'm a meat eater, I think meat is I'm not a, vegan, but for a period of time, I have found that if people want to get rid of viral infections, fungal infections, and bacterial infections, going on a vegan diet, using beans as a source of protein, as well, as long as they're soaked and cooked well, as long as you can tolerate them and digest them. um, Nuts and seeds, obviously all kinds of vegetables, and some fruits. You want to be a little bit careful from just going overloaded in the fruit area, but you can, I mean, fruits generally are tolerated. It's good to start out with the low glycemic fruits and then kind of play around and see what fruits work for you. Because for some people, there's like salicylates and things like that will aggravate their histamine symptoms at first. So a lot of fruits have that. You have to be a little bit careful when you're first figuring this out. So it can seem really complicated for somebody who's really struggling, but that's what I found to work the best, is going on a low microbe diet. That means no ferments. Because like I just sat here and talked how awesome ferments are. They're amazing. And I think this is a really interesting point. You know, it's like we believe that there's a magic bullet we're like, there's a magic bullet. This thing is going to save me. I have to have it. And I work with a lot of people with histamine issues who are like, I have to get my ferments in. Like I need to take my ferments, because like, that's how I'm going to get my probiotics. That's how I'm going to fix my gut. And I'm like, well, you know, actually you'll fix your gut by feeding your gut exactly what it needs for the right microbes to grow. And by not feeding your gut all of the stuff that's going to exacerbate certain bacterial infections. And for a time, you just have to go off ferments and clear your body of the histamine, and also stop taking various microbes so that your body can just balance and achieve some bacterial balance within the colon by just being the only factor that's that they're having to deal with is the food that you're putting in. You're not adding more information from microbes or all of their byproducts, their metabolites, like the organic acids, the lactic acid, acetic acid, all these various organic acids that the bacteria create in the process of fermentation. Those can be aggravating for somebody when they're trying to, you know, just chill out their microbiome and let everything go to what their normal is, you know. And it's an interesting concept to me, this whole idea of the microbiome, because it's ever changing. You know, you're
in
never
our own bodies, you mean?
in your own bodies. It's never going to be, you don't ever go, hi, I'm there. Here's my perfect microbiome and I have it and I'm going to keep it. It's just going to stay this way. Like, your microbiome is affected by every single bite of food that you eat. And then I guess, I don't know if I guess this is good, but it's also, for some people this is bad, but it's also strongly affected by stress. Strongly. So there's this whole concept called microbial endocrinology. There's a fascinating textbook about it. The guy who started this realm of study was considered a total kook. And when he was started in the 80s, he actually did a presentation on this. And then the organizer at the conference came up on stage while he was still there and said, everything he said, you need to just ignore that.
What was he saying? That the microbiome changes, or that
Basically,
stress affects it?
What he was teaching was that the hormones that our body produces communicate to bacteria and other microbes, and that they produce various hormones and hormone similes like that can communicate to our bodies. And so he was basically saying there's a signaling process, a chemical signaling between our cells and human cells and bacterial cells. And they talk to each other, and it's true. It's called, like, I call it text messaging. Like, these like hormones are essentially text messages, and our human cells are on AT&T, just as an example. Like, they're on one carrier, and then all the bacterial cells, or maybe they're on Verizon, so they're on their own carrier. Guess what? They can still text back and forth. They still can, send and receive messages from each other. They just, they might not be run exactly the same way. They have, different things going on higher up. So I think it's really cool to me, like, this whole concept that these organisms are communicating with us and we're communicating with them. But what this scientist found is that in the presence of epinephrine and various other hormones, but stress hormones, cortisol, things like that, these organisms replicate faster. So, to take this another level further, when we experience stress, our bodies actually improve our immune function. So
temporarily, or for at least for a period. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they just do. Biochemically, all of our like immune function turns on, it becomes more activated. We actually have a stronger immune system. But why do people get sick more often when they're stressed. Well, the reason is because when they're stressed, they have more cortisol, they have more epinephrine, and those chemicals literally communicate to the bacteria, and the bacteria will replicate faster, especially pathogenic bacteria. They will replicate faster in that environment. So
Mm.
they read that message, that stress hormone, they see that message, the bacteria do, and they go, oh my gosh, like, oh my gosh, freak out, freak out. We've got to just like go into reproduction mode. And that's all they do. So you get sicker easier when you're stressed because you're actually feeding the organisms.
Mm.
And you're
Interesting.
sending them messages by saying, replicate, divide, faster, faster, faster. And our body supposedly, I mean, our immune system is stronger technically, but we're not able to use that to our benefit because they're actually getting a stronger benefit from those chemicals than we are.
Interesting. Yeah. And I know like molds will grow more and reproduce when they're under stress. So it could be even like well, it could be that they're stressed, like, oh, my host is going down, or like you kind of, and we need to replicate. Or I wonder if they sort of take advantage of that weakness in
I think
some
they're
way
taking
too.
advantage of the weakness.
Yeah.
I don't think
Yeah.
they necessarily, they don't have brains. So I don't think that they're going, oh, the host is going down. I think that it is literally a chemical stimulant to them. It's
Just
just a
a
trigger.
simple stimulant. Yeah. I want to share a couple examples from my own life that kind of tie into that. So I went to a microbiome course, I don't know, like a month ago, and one talk was on the vaginal microbiome. I know way more about it than I ever needed to, but they were saying how much it changes. It changes a lot over the course of the month. And I recently went through some super acute stress, and about a month later, when my period was going on, I just got this like massive fungal infection. And I'm like, well, no wonder my hormones were changing. They're probably lower from all the stress. And it just helped me like understand what that kind of process was. And just one more example, more to the point of histamines. So this last spring, I got super bad asthma. Like I had to go to urgent care. I had to get an inhaler. I hadn't been like that in 20 some years. And I want to go back to how you said that the causes can be deep, because I'm pretty healthy now. I have a pretty complex health history, but I'm pretty healthy now. And I was, surprised. But a couple of points I want to make is one, like, yeah, I think it can be really deep. Like I still think I have candida from my mold exposure that I never finished addressing. And you mentioned that as being a thing. And then also like when you're in it, you have to address it. You have to breathe. So it can be really overwhelming. I took Dr. Karazian's course too. And he's like, the gut is communicating with other systems, but you can't always just treat the gut. And of course it's not ideal to end up like on an inhaler or whatever, but sometimes just life gets intense and you can't breathe. So I was also doing other things, cough syrups and herbal things. But next year, living in this climate, it might come up again. So I really have to get ahead of it with my root causes. And I did buy your diet, which I'm assuming is the thing I bought. I tried to put the link in there because I'm like, something, is going on with histamines for me. And I don't fully get it, but I know I have to do some research and resetting.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think so there's two things that I would look at here. I'm going to put a different link in here. That's my old website. We're phasing out of it.
Oh, okay.
That's the new one. So honestly, I mean, the easiest, cheapest, best thing to do, first step, is to learn how to master your adaptive stress response. So, I mean, and it literally will control this better than anything else. And you'll have very quick results with it. So, you're going to stop the growth of whatever organisms are invading your body, whether it's candida or whatever. Like you'll stop and halt their reproductive capacity. So learning how to totally relax in any moment. Like, sure, you can go into fight or flight, but you need to be so adapted that you can immediately go back into parasympathetic.
Wow. Yeah.
And
Yeah. That's a big life lesson, especially nowadays. we're almost encouraged to stay in fight or flight nowadays.
I agree. And I mean, I think like people drink coffee and we crave stimulants because we all crave to be at a certain level of productivity that allows us to like feel like we did something today, or that, we can value ourselves. Our self-worth is so connected to our level of productivity. So I think it's really important that, people don't overlook this whole concept around anti-stress. I don't even want to use the term stress management, because we've said that for so long that people just glaze over. They don't really care. What does that mean anyway? And what I'm saying is like, you've actually got to, like, if I was hanging out with you, I would want to know, like, can you just sit and chill and do nothing? Can we just like sit back, put our feet up on the couch and have a conversation and just chill? And can you be comfortable there? Like, can you be cool relaxing, right? Like, so, and I'm not just saying that to you, Bridget, obviously, like, I'm just kind of saying that to everybody, like learning how to actually relax. And there are some things to consider. A lot of us have very dysfunctional lives. We have messes and projects all throughout our lives. I think a really simple one, my simplest advice is go through your house and look and see what you have. What kind of unfinished projects do you have sitting out? Do you have a pile of clothes that you want to sew one day? Do you have a box full of like photos that you're going to put in a photo album one day? Like, do you have projects sitting out and about in your house? Like, anywhere? Like, is there disorder? Is there clutter? Are there things that just aren't handled?
Because it stresses you like on a low level.
It's a daily trigger for stress.
Yeah, I hate piles. I've really been good about piles lately.
Yeah, it's a big one. Finances are a huge one. People figuring out their finances, getting really clear with what is enough. Are you spending more than you actually have? If so, you're creating more stress in your body and actually making yourself sicker. Like, that's what I'm saying, is like these things that we're not handling in our everyday lives is making our bodies sicker. And when histamines are an issue, it can go from feeling decent to feeling really crappy, having an asthma attack or having a case of hives, or just not sleeping well, getting insomnia or anxiety or a migraine. And then it's putting you out. You're now down for the count. Right. And so like the detriment can come, it's really quick. So I think these are things to consider. I mean, you really have to look at stress. And so how do you figure out how to relieve stress besides just handling your life? I mean, it takes, really handling things that you might not be good at. For people with finances, it might be opening up your bills earlier, sitting down and having time to spend with money and looking at the real numbers instead of avoiding it. Maybe doing it with a friend or somebody who cares about you so that you can get the support you need to figure out what you don't know yet. I think part of it is vulnerability and learning how to ask for help and being okay with the fact that we don't know everything. And maybe we aren't as functional of an adult as we would like to be. Like, these are key issues that people are totally ignoring. And I know this because I work with my clients all the time, and these are the issues that they're avoiding, and it's triggering some major health problems. And when they resolve this, the health problems are going away. I mean, literally, like with finances, having 6 months of emergency savings is what I would consider a very healthy thing for your histamine levels.
It's true. Yeah. And I think this is, you're kind of saying a benefit of working with a coach, whether it's your team or our team or anybody, because often someone else can see that thing. It's super obvious to everybody but you, and that's kind of what I've been going through for a while. It's just like, yeah, there's time. I guess I feel like my life lesson lately is just like about really like letting go of things that don't serve you, even if you really, really wanted that thing to work out. Because, and it was getting to the point where it's just like to stay in chronic stress, trying to make something happen that isn't happening. It's just not sustainable. You can't live there. It almost has to be like, except in acute situations, like your ability to like have peace is just like paramount. Like nothing is really worth that being broken, especially for a long time. There'll be short time, your kid's in an accident or something, or the stress has to come up, but you can't stay there. It's just, yeah. And you can ask for friends help when you're in an acute situation like that and that kind of thing, which is a huge support.
But this is driving people sickness. And what they try to do is they try to manage the things that they can control, like what they put in their mouths. their food. They're like, oh my gosh, I can control my food. I can't control my finances. I can't control this, but I can control my food. So I'm going to deal with the food piece. And I think that's where people are making, like, yes, you want to be eating well. Yes, there are foods to help with histamine issues. You know, like I'm talking about the low microbe diet. Those are real things, but you can't just do that. You have to pay attention to these other pieces. Otherwise, if you're not learning how to build the resilience of your adaptive stress response, it doesn't matter how clean you eat. And in
That's
fact,
a great point. I love that you're throwing that down because you're not profiting off any of this. This is just
no,
the truth.
no, no. I mean, this is just what it takes. And so let's talk about some of the things that you can actually do. So let's categorize that under that anti-stress component under handle the things that are stressing you out, like really handle them and get yourself high functioning. That's one. Another piece of anti-stress is learning how to relax your nervous system and get into a parasympathetic state. So a couple techniques that I have found very useful for that. You've probably heard of HeartMath, heart rate variability. HeartMath is a great device you put on your ear, and it can help you learn how to get into a more parasympathetic state. I think it's good. I think it's a good tool. It's not the end all be all, in my opinion. I also think there's a few other things you can do that I think are even more beneficial, or maybe beneficial alongside HeartMath. Another one of them is called Yoga Nidra. There's a woman named Karen Brody. She wrote a book called Daring to Rest, I believe. And she has some free meditations. And I also bought her course. It's like a 30-day course or 21-day course on Yoga Nidra. And she does these meditations and they help you get into a parasympathetic state. And they work really well because that's her goal during these meditations. She's guiding you the entire time and you really feel it. Like it helps you get into that parasympathetic state. And then another thing, and this is kind of cheesy, funny, goofy, but it's really true. Human contact relaxes our nervous system drastically. And so spooning, I'm going to put spooning in my top 3.
It just got said. I think 2 pets can be really good with that. Yeah, you know, you absolutely. Can cuddle pets if you don't have a partner, you're living alone.
100%. I mean, you know, I will say the benefit of like a strong, secure person that can like, you know, put their arm around you, like even if it's your parents or so, you know, whatever, it doesn't matter. A good friend that can like really put their arm around you and just like chill with you for a minute. Like if you are dealing with histamine issues, your nervous system is jacked. Right. And so to actually get the stability of somebody, it's a contradiction. I mean, it helps our bodies and our brains kind of change the way we're functioning. I mean, yawning is a really good example of this. Like, you know how yawning is contagious? Yawning is actually a sign that people are shifting into the parasympathetic state. So when people are like, you're yawning in a class and people are like, oh, you're getting bored. And whenever I yawn and people are like, oh my gosh, are you bored? Are you tired? I'm like, no, I'm like waking up. No, like I'm getting to a good place here. I'm just shaking off the tension, you know, shaking off the fear, like getting, you know, really for me, yawning is like shaking off the fear. It's helping to get rid of that fight or flight place and get you into a parasympathetic. And so, you know, I just think this is super important for people to know. So stress, big. Number one way to tackle your gut infections and to help with your viral load and to help with the fungal infections that are going on. Because if you can really, truly relax, like right now, if you can take a deep breath and you can relax and you can get your nervous system into that parasympathetic state, which is the state of rest and digest, it's a state of healing. If you can do that, all the crazy replication stops. And now your body can take over and your immune system can work at its fullest functioning.
That's so powerful. Yeah. And I really believe it. You know, when I was before I got hit my sickest, I was running a clinic that was running me into the ground again, that I should have made that decision sooner. Like nothing is worth this kind of a thing. And I really think, you know, that of course there's multi-factors, but I really think that long period of being so in fight or flight, very much considered, you know, to the jumble that many people end up in finally, viruses, parasites, bacterial infections, mold. It's like your body just can't step up to all those jobs.
Your body has no chance against bacteria that are in the presence of epinephrine and norepinephrine.
Interesting.
Because they have the advantage when norepinephrine and epinephrine are present. They have the biological advantage. They always will have the biological advantage. So you're never going to win that war with bacteria if you're in a state of fight. Fight or flight is meant for tigers. It's not meant for bacteria. So, I think it's really important. You've got to consider this. And the reason I'm stressing anti-stress is because when you do this, you actually open up the amount of foods that you can eat. You actually increase the diversity of foods that you're able to eat and digest. And that's the thing that happens when people have histamine issues. They actually end up restricting till you have this very narrow range of foods, which doesn't feed you all the nutrition you need. And it doesn't feed all the different good bacteria in your gut, because you're not getting enough fibers, and you're not getting all the things that you actually need to stay healthy in the long run. So to me, this is like the biggest needle mover. But when it comes to ferments and histamines, I will just say a couple things. Like there are a lot of histamines in sauerkraut. There's a lot of histamines in wine. There's histamines in water kefir, like all of these ferments, there's histamines in them.
Kombucha too, right?
Kombucha, all of them.
All of them.
Absolutely. Okay. Cheese, everything. All the ferments have histamines in them. And, you generally need to chill out on those until you get your histamine issue, the root cause of the histamine issues figured out. And then you can start adding in the ferments. Or if you're more comfortable with it, you can just lower it down to do, some people will have like, literally like a teaspoon of sauerkraut brine every other day, or maybe once a week even, just to get a little bit in there. But
you're still like, if you do this microbiome, you're getting, like you said, tons of fibers to feed your gut. So it's still okay. And you can work on your stress. Yeah. I like how you said, everything, like the microbiome changes, health changes, like things I need to do today, I might not need to do in 3 months. I like to just feel into what's going on. This is also why I don't make essential oil blends. Marisa was on a couple of weeks, because I'm like, I like a blend right now, but in a couple of weeks I might need another blend. So why make it now? So like, be adaptable. And I like you said, there's no one good diet. People get obsessed with like, I have to have my ferments. Well, maybe in 6 months you can have them all because you've worked on all this stuff. But I love that. Just, feeling into what's the need right now. Yeah. So Summer, we just have a few minutes because I have a client soon. So anybody live have questions that came up? This was so rich. Thank you so much.
You're
love
welcome.
it.
Great. I saw that Renee earlier said that she's done water kefir. So she's made water kefir and she tried to make sauerkraut, but it didn't smell good. So she threw it out. I will say sauerkraut can be a little tricky the first time or the first couple times. I do have a class on it. And so
like an online class.
I have an online class that teaches you how to
put that in there.
And I can pull that up here in just a second. But I really think that everybody should learn how to make ferments. I think everybody should learn how to make sauerkraut. It's such an important part of helping us learn how to be symbiotic creatures, because the truth is that humans are symbiotic creatures on the planet. And when we are, not taking good care of our environment, we're adding all these chemicals into our environment, we're doing all of these things that we've been doing, that's not helpful, because in the end, we're actually hurting our own bodies and we're not being symbiotic. We're not, being symbiotic with all of the, animals and plants in the world. We're destroying habitats, like all those things. So we're not being symbiotic creatures. So the reason that I recommend that people do learn how to ferment is that it's a fast track into learning how to become a symbiont yourself. And I don't know why or what happens there, but there's something that happens in the moment where you chop up these vegetables, add salt, put it on your counter, and let it just sit there and ferment in the danger zone. Like the health department will tell you, if you leave stuff out of your fridge for, over 2 hours, everybody's paranoid and they throw it away. But we're leaving it there for weeks. And then we're going to eat it. And you have to go through this paradigm shift to scrape off that top layer, dig down in there and take a bite. Like, it's terrifying for people. And I've experienced that terror with every new kind of ferment that I've done. And I think it's a really important thing for us to understand, because over time, what happens is you learn how to trust your senses. And once you learn how to trust your senses and you start tapping into your gut intuition and your intuition that's like connected to the sense of smell and your sense of taste. I mean, these are all connected to your gut. It's part of your digestive system. When you start tapping into that and the power of that, you give yourself huge freedom to start figuring out exactly what your body needs in every moment. Because your body, it's a computer. Your body is able to process all this information, all these hormones, all these chemicals, these neurotransmitters, all the food, all the nutrients. It's it's literally taking all of this information and saying, you take a bite of food, you digest it later on. Maybe you didn't like a sip of coffee at first, and then later kind of you love it because it did something for you. Or you take a bite of sauerkraut and you hated it the first time, and then all of a sudden a week later you're just like, why can't I stop thinking about that? It's because your body it changes the taste, because your body says, I liked whatever was in there. That did something for me, whether it was a dopamine hit, maybe it's more addictive, or it was a nutritional need. Your body will adapt and adjust. And when you can learn to tap into that and listen, I think that's freedom. And I think that's when you start to learn how to trust your own body. And I think that's when you get on the path of really healing, because if you can listen to that and you can align the thoughts in your head with the smell, with the taste, with the feeling in your belly, if you can align all of those separate kind of voices to all be one, then you are on track and you're living in alignment, you're living in integrity with yourself, and you're respecting what your body is asking for, versus, going to the fridge and you're craving, let's say in that moment, you're craving chocolate and you're going to the fridge, you're like, oh no, I shouldn't have chocolate right now. It has histamine in it. No, there's sugar in it. And I mean, but it has magnesium. I am about to start my period. And, so maybe, okay, how about this? I'm going to eat a salad first. Maybe I'll do a spinach salad because it's like all these extra nutrients. And then, oh wait, but I have to put fat in my salad dressing, because in order to get all the nutrients from from spinach, and also to balance out all the oxalic acid, I should make sure I have fat in there. Okay. So that, you're thinking about all these things. That's the thought process that people have when they eat. And when you're going through that thought process and making deals with yourself, you aren't listening to your gut. That's not listening to your gut. That's listening to your brain, and your brain doesn't know anything when it comes to what you need today.
Yeah. I think that does get lost. I have so many people who come to us privately and they're just like, I just don't know what to eat anymore. There's so much information about all the things I shouldn't eat. And they're just really overwhelmed, and it's sad. I get it, because we're in that age. But yeah, listening to your body, it does change. It changes with the seasons and with your hormones and all sorts of things. And I like how you said you can kind of develop taste for things. Definitely try things. There's other things you can ferment too, like cucumbers and different things. So if you're nervous about sauerkraut, try other things. And maybe Renee and everybody, there's going to be batches that go nasty.
Well, until you get good at it. They don't.
Okay, not for you anymore.
There's a point. No. I will not. Sauerkraut will not go bad for me anymore.
In the beginning,
you learn real things that prevent it from going bad in the future.
Nice.
There's only a few mistakes that you can make, and there's just, once you learn what those are, you won't make them anymore.
Okay.
So, yeah, there's other ferments that are trickier that you might mess up on later when you're good, but sauerkraut is the easiest one.
Awesome. Well, we put the links in the chat, and everybody, we always put these in YouTube later with the links and such. And I'm actually going to publish, Vincent was just on Tuesday, so I'm going to publish your 2 videos together and all your links, because you were both just a super awesome, wealth of information. Digestion is so complex, and there's so many angles, but you both just had a really great approach that was kind of holistic and approachable. So thank you so much for coming on, Summer. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And thanks to everyone who was live. We'll see you next week. Bye, everybody.
Bye.